Oh, hey y'all. Hello, and welcome back to an early, maybe we'll call this evening shift. Night shift with Andrea up late. I'm joined tonight, as always, by my co-host, Brian Sanders. Brian is a retired homicide lieutenant, so he can offer a lot of expertise when we are presenting these true crime cases. Brian, how are you doing?
Wonderful.
Wonderful?
Mm-hmm.
You a little under the weather today?
Yeah. Got a good old root canal scheduled for tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. He'll still talk. Don't worry, guys.
Yeah, it's not going to slow me down talking.
It's still going to happen.
And we just came off of a week of
spring break.
Spring break, sun, beach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So due to that, we did not have a show last week. I apologize, you guys. We just kind of took a week to recharge. The week before that, however, we covered the Summer Wells case out of Tennessee, a little 5-year-old girl who went missing. It remains unresolved. Lots of speculation. If you go on YouTube or Google, interviews abound with her parents and friends of the family, and it's always a little interesting to watch. So definitely check that out. Check out our episode on that. I think it went well, and I think that you'll get to learn a lot about that. But in saying that, we, like Brian was saying, had last week off, but that did not come without some crazy updates. So I think, as a lot of people are doing right now, we are going back to cover something that we haven't touched in a while. It's been, oh goodness, about a year ago, I think, since we, at least on air, did anything in terms of covering the case of, it was the death of Grant Solomon, that we were just going to briefly touch on tonight because it's too much. We did 3 episodes on it, and that's not enough to tell everything. And we have things in this binder still that aren't even out there. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot. We're going to touch on it a little bit. It's been kind of a lot to reopen all of this, but people got to know the Solomon family when Grant perished in a death that has certainly at least been deemed suspicious by many, many people. And as the years go by and more eyes are able to look at this case and figure it out, many people come to that same consensus. And so that was in 2020. And once we all got to learn, meaning the national public, right? And once we all got to learn about Grant and his life and the circumstances surrounding his death, we then all got to know the family a little bit better, and a history of some patterns of alleged, abuse and things throughout the family. We got to know his mom. We got to know his sister, who had allegations against her father of her own. And that's how we all, and whoever follows this case, got to know the whole family. And that's kind of where we left it, was all of the detailed circumstances surrounding Grant's death, and then that actually those starts to spiral out. And so we were talking about local church members, the private school employees, branching out to local politicians that went to church at the church affiliated with that same private school. And then that branched out into higher forms of government within Tennessee. This is a case that happened in Middle Tennessee. And all the way up to, there was a point we were talking about the governor's office, Bill Lee's office in Tennessee. So if you want to learn all of those facts and you haven't yet, I do urge you to take a listen. Thankfully for that family at this point, you can find about anything you want to know about it. There's scene photos, there's anything you want to learn, you can pretty much find online, which is actually, we always counted that as a very big plus for the family, particularly for Angie, Grant's mother, for honestly the spirit of Grant and his death, and then also for his sister Gracie, who is still alive and well, and trying to figure her way out through all of this. So again, we did a part 1, part 2, and part 3. I linked, I believe, part 3 on my Instagram on Andrea Up Late today, but you can just go back through to our YouTube channel and find all of them there. But we do interview Grant's mother, Angie, in parts 2 and 3, because part 2 went too long. We had to spill it over to a third part, which that one itself was, I think, 2 hours. So they're not short episodes. There's a lot to take in when you listen to them. But if I may regret saying this, but I don't. If you listen to our coverage of the Boys on the Tracks, it may not seem that wild to you, but the more you learn about this case, it does become like that. So it's bogged down with many thorns in the case, and snags, and we're kind of big fans, and particularly with Brian's history and his employment history, his career, of saying that sometimes if a lot of things aren't making sense, there's a reason things don't make sense. You can make something make sense if it's supposed to, right? So I think that case just kind of abounds with all of that. So moving forward, the reason we're here today is because during our little hiatus last week, we got notification that on Friday, April 11th, Angie Solomon, who is Grant's mother, was arrested in Franklin, Tennessee with the charge of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. She had exchanged money, amongst other things, as a transaction to hire what wound up being an undercover police officer there in the parking lot of the mall in Franklin, and was arrested on that charge. She had a hearing on Monday, August. What would that have been? The 14th was her first appearance, and so really, if you're not familiar, that just kind of not really much happens there. Okay, so you can't even really expect a whole lot. She's in the Williamson County Jail there in Franklin, Tennessee. Keep in mind, this is not the same jurisdiction where Grant's death occurred. That was in Gallatin, which is like just an outskirt of Nashville, and Franklin is as well, but a little bit farther away. And so where his death took place was in a fully different jurisdiction. And it's important to remember that, because in terms of his death, there currently still a lot of talk of potential negligence, corruption, just wild stuff that we might get into a little bit. But again, this is a different jurisdiction where Angie was arrested. It's actually where they lived, but not where Grant passed away. So she had her first appearance on Monday, April 14th. And at that time, she was appointed a public defender. And then they set a new date for the next day. That Tuesday, the 15th, was to be the bond reduction hearing. She is held on a $500,000 bond currently. So Tuesday came and went, and that never happened. No one really knows in the public why exactly it didn't happen, and it could be just really like a clerical type situation. It may not be a big deal as to why that bond hearing didn't happen on Tuesday morning. Either way, it didn't. We do know that the only people present in the courtroom during that, what was supposed to be the bond reduction hearing, was the news station WSMV and one Aaron Solomon, who is Grant's father. He is one that, we'll talk about him a little bit, but also WSMV is the news station that he formerly was an anchorman at. So they were the only two there at the court hearing, and then that never even took place. So as we speak, where it stands right now is that Angie is being held in the Williamson County Jail on a $500,000 bond, with a charge of attempting to solicit first-degree murder via a hired hand. And she has an actual, real court date, first court date. It was May. It looks like it may have been bumped to late April, but the last I saw it was May 29th, I believe. Either way, we'll definitely be keeping you guys posted as we know more about that. So, we're kind of going to get into it, I guess, a little bit. Everyone is obviously innocent until proven guilty. This is just, I think that you guys can imagine, especially if you've followed this case or listened to any coverage, I think it's heartbreaking. I don't think there's any, regardless of what happened or what people think happened, people are already starting to, kind of think up narratives and whatever. We don't know yet exactly what's going on, but either way, at any turn, it's tough. It's a big one. So let's talk. Do you think I should just give them like a tiny recap of a little bit of what that looked like moving forward to where we are? Because if I just say that someone potentially hired a hitman, like with no context to their history, right? I mean, I'll keep this as broad and as generally, like just generically speaking, as possible. But Grant, the boy I told you about that died in the suspicious accident, and I'm happy to answer any questions later on at any time. Shoot an email or a message if you have questions about that. Like I said, you can find almost everything you need online about that case as it is. But Grant was a baseball phenom. Okay, so he had scholarships coming in. Grant, at the time of his death, was 17, just turning 18 years old. To give you some perspective, there's some context. He was a senior in high school. His little sister, Gracie, they both attended Grace Christian Academy, which is a private Christian school there in Franklin, Tennessee. And it was fully associated with a church of about the same name. And when I say that, I mean that like the preacher of the church also had like business claims in the school. That has since been separated, I think, for legal and business purposes. But that's kind of the setup there. There was a time in 2013 that Angie and their father, Aaron, got a divorce. This came after years of alleged abuse from Aaron. There are plenty of court records there. And finally, it culminated into a pretty nasty divorce. By that point, Gracie, Grant's little sister, had come to her mother to let her know that she had been enduring sexual abuse from her father for a while. And she explained these things. There's actually a YouTube video where Gracie, once she was 17, came out. Actually, gosh, was she 14? Did she read? I want to say she was 14 when she read the letter, but she read a letter that she wrote on YouTube. And that's what started a movement and a webpage and an organization that they're calling Freedom for Gracie. So you can look that stuff up as well. I'm not going to get into the weeds of all that tonight, but these are the allegations from Gracie about her father, to the point that she would mention that he would often fix her a quote, like a special lemonade. She might wake up kind of groggy and she may have pains in certain places and these kinds of things. So these are Gracie's allegations against her father. Around the same time, we learned that, and there are psychiatrist reports we have, it's not just hearsay. There's documentation at different psychiatrists, medical doctors, court orders, things like this, that Aaron was, at the very least, you could say overbearing. We know that he controlled, for instance, like Grant's bathroom habits when he was coming up as a little boy growing up. And Grant even spoke on this, I believe, to his guardian ad litem, who was an attorney there, who said that, he would be punished for either going to the bathroom too much or too little. Grant had a lock on the outside of his door growing up as he got a little bit older. And so Aaron was known to fits of, anger. He would anger kind of quickly. And so leading up to the time of Grant's death, the divorce had taken place in 2013. At one point, there was just a long and drawn out, again, tonight's not the night for it, but custody battle between the two, allegations on both ends. Aaron tried to have Angie committed, saying that her mental faculties were not there and that she was suicidal and that she was not fit to care for the children. To which Angie went to the hospital and was thoroughly evaluated by more than one psychiatrist, who then wrote their own notes to the judge for custody's sake, saying that they did not deem her incapacitated mentally at all. In fact, they said, if anything, she would very likely have a diagnosis of PTSD after many years of an abusive marriage. They said that she would occasionally have maybe minor bouts of depression, but no suicidal ideations, nothing like this at the time. Around that same time, Aaron had, when he claimed that she needed to be committed for losing her mental faculties, he claimed that she had tried to harm herself, if you will. Remember, guys, it's YouTube, so certain words will get us kind of kicked off, but harm herself with the cord of a hairdryer. And that she wasn't fit to care for the children. At that same time, in fact, though, Angie claimed that Aaron tried to do that to her with a hairdryer. Okay. So when she goes to this doctor, he says what I just told you, that she was actually mentally stable. None of this was to be true. But he would give her that diagnosis of PTSD after years of this abuse. They also deemed her medical doctors and psychiatrists to then, on the medical side of things, that hairdryer cord mark around her neck was not consistent with self-inflicted harm if she were to have tried to do that to herself. It was, however, consistent with someone else wrapping it around her. So all of this just kind of further corroborated what she said was going on at home. If you go to some of these websites that talk about this case, there's one in particular where a lot of victims of domestic violence will come on and type and say basically almost how validating it is, as sad as it is, to read about the history of this family and these court cases, because you will see that time and time again, Angie's going to court. More times than not, she has to be on the defense. She's trying to fight against allegations that she's not fit to take care of the kids. She's almost always deemed like correct, like that she's okay, but somehow he's able to continuously like win these suits. And somehow, I know exactly how, but a lot of these victims or survivors of domestic violence have gone on. I was reading a bunch this week leading up to today saying that like it almost feels validating reading this, because if you can be in that situation, and I think some of our listeners have been in similar situations, they've written out to us before, but that how you can feel crazy, right? Because you're constantly having to prove that you're not. And meanwhile, this person's doing these things to you. And so I don't know, it's just a little bit enlightening to read some of those words from people that would say that about this case. But either way, that was during the divorce, around the divorce starting time in 2013. It was long, it was drawn out, it was bad and contentious, as you can imagine. There was a point when Aaron was able to get custody of the children. And when he did, he took the money out of the bank account, took the kids, proceeded to tell both children that their mother was dead, which they believed for a few months before being able to be returned to their mother's care after a lot more in and out of court. So just very much goes into all of the stuff leading up. So as time went on, without going into the rest of the details now, finally, Gracie ultimately was able to get a no contact order on Aaron, her dad. And at one point when Angie had gone to court to try to get more, custodial rights and things like that and get them back, the judge there, Deanna Johnson, said that this was 2019. I believe it was February of 19, but either way, said that she called Angie an abusive litigant, and said that she was no longer able to file any litigation, bring any charges or attempt to against Aaron for the next 6 years in that county or surrounding ones. Now, we've talked about this at length. We talked about it the first time we covered the show. Is that ever anything you've ever heard a judge say?
No. No, and I mean, on the civil side, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that we never hear about or see in the news, but I think you'd have to truly be abusing court. I don't know. I don't know how that works. I don't know how you prove.
I tried to find it. I mean, I tried to find instances or any kind of case law or anything like that. Yeah. Talk to other people. I've not yet been able to find something like that. Either way, she did. And it becomes a little bit, well, not a little bit. It became a lot more convoluted, because then you find out that Deanna Johnson is actually just a very dear friend of Aaron's. They would have dinner often, all of these kinds of things. Okay. Again, I'll say it a lot tonight because this is a much shorter show. I'm going to go on and let you guys know that, but just know that there is so much like that. So when I say that, he was friends with that judge, so that's already a conflict. That judge should have never been able to take that case. She should have recused herself of the case before she was even able to have that in front of her. But just know, like, if you think, whew, that's crazy, guys, that's nothing. That's nothing when you look at the history of this family and this case leading up to Grant's death. Okay. So ultimately speaking, like I told you, Grant was receiving a lot of scholarships or opportunities, I should say, for scholarships for his baseball. He was, again, a phenom. All of his friends were starting to get letters in the mail for all the schools that it looked like they were going to be, get a ride to. And Grant was getting, quite honestly, frustrated. Angie will say a bit depressed, because he didn't understand why he was not being afforded the same opportunities, because his talent was there. And then you find out that actually those had been coming, but Aaron had changed the school mail to his address, and he was getting these scholarship applications and not telling Grant about it whatsoever because he wasn't yet finding the one college he wanted Grant to go to school for. And if you can find anything comical, there's nothing comical about any of this, but I will lighten the mood a little bit to say that Aaron wanted him to go to Harvard on a baseball scholarship. So they're well known for their baseball. But either way, this is just another piece to add to this puzzle, because if you've ever had a teenager, particularly in sports, like if this is what they've been looking forward to and working so hard, and they find out that their dad, who they already have no contact with, Aaron and Grant had not spoken 2 years prior to Grant's death. They had not spent time together for 2 full years until the morning that Grant died. Okay. It was not long before this that Grant found out about these scholarships. The plan was that Grant was turning 18. The plan was not just his to know. It was not just his mom's to know. This isn't hearsay in the sense that mom is saying this is what Grant was going to do, or that his sister Gracie was saying that this is what Grant was going to do. Grant's friends spoke to this, to the point that ultimately Aaron tried to sue for defamation, not only Angie, Grant's mother, but Grant's friends, these children, these teenage boys. Okay. So even these boys knew, and they've been interviewed. They know, they've said that, that Grant was going to confront or go to court because he was going to try to actually just get custody of Gracie while she was still a minor once he turned 18, and pretty much blow it up about his dad. And he had waited. The guardian ad litem that took both Gracie and Grant in said that Grant would get a little hushed when it came to his dad, because Grant's actual words were, I'm scared to say anything. Like, I know what is to be true. I'm waiting. Basically, he was waiting until he turned 18 because he was terrified that his dad would be able to use that stuff against him and take them from their mother's home again. So we know that these are some of the thoughts and feelings leading up to the morning that Grant died. And the morning he died, he was set to meet his dad at a baseball training facility. Okay, it's called WPI, Ward Performance Institute. And it was there in Gallatin, Tennessee. So this is about a 45, 50-minute drive from Grant's home in Franklin. So this was July of 2020. Can you guys take yourselves back? What was going on in July of 2020? It's COVID, right? So there were shutdowns. The roads were not as inhabited, right? There wasn't traffic like normal. So when you think about going back to having, let's say, a private baseball instruction at a place like this, picture like an aluminum, like a large aluminum complex that you go into, and then you can go out back and do things like that with, practice your pitching, your hitting, whatever skills and agility you're practicing. So this is not a time when there would have been 50 people in and out of there in the summertime, all these kids training up for the school year, right? That wasn't going to happen because it was COVID. So if you remember, that was like individual appointment time. Everybody had their individual appointment before you could do anything. So I'm setting that scene to let you know this was not a full parking lot and this was not a full facility. There weren't any kind of eyes on this parking lot or on Grant or even potentially Aaron this morning. And that morning, set to go, Grant, per Aaron's account, because Aaron is the only one who has an account of this, that he says that he pulled into the parking lot and parked. He says that Grant pulled in his 2015 white Toyota Tacoma right beside him. He says that he was looking down at his phone and he was checking a work email. He was very detailed in the events that took place prior to Grant's death. That's something that we talk about, and I'll have Brian talk on it here in a moment. Often with these cases, when people suddenly get a little confusion or amnesia, but everything else they tell has just incredible detail, okay? And this is no exception. So Aaron says that he pulls in, Grant pulls up to the other side of him. He says Grant got out to get his baseball equipment out of the back of the truck. This is something that his family and friends have contested because he had some newer equipment that they say he would not have thrown in the bed of his truck for that long of a drive. But either way, he says Grant got out to get it. He says, I looked down to check a work email. And then next thing I know, I look up and Grant's gone. Now, if I'm saying it differently than you heard, it's because I could tell you about 10 different ways to say that. And Aaron said them all. His particular account of the events that morning changed often in the days that followed. So he says that he got out of his truck. One of the accounts is that I looked all around. He will reenact this. You can find him on YouTube. He became quite an actor during this time. And Did a lot of acting and reenactment, I should say, saying, I looked around. Sometimes he'll say, I saw and heard the truck rolling backward.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes he says, I heard a noise and I look around and looked for Grant. I couldn't find my son. And then you realize he's at the bottom of this ravine. Now, I don't have the photos for you tonight. We've shown them, over and over and over again. They are already on my Instagram. I'll put a new post up tonight. But Grant's truck was in the ditch at the bottom of this parking lot. It's not a very big parking lot at all. Okay. And it's not an incredibly steep parking lot. There is a decline from the facility to the ditch to then the highway behind it. But it's not a very long amount of space, meaning if the truck were to roll backward, it wouldn't have that far to go in terms of picking up speed. It wouldn't, a lot of these things. So long story short, Grant is found under the truck in that ditch. So like the grassy and rocky, like ravine before Highway 109, the main highway out there. Grant's head was facing away from the road. Okay. He was lying on his back, face up, with his head between the two front tires. The truck was over him and his legs were almost a little bit diagonal. Now, Grant was around 6'3", 6'4". He was a very tall boy. So a Toyota Tacoma is not that large of a truck. So as you can imagine, his legs kind of came out a bit beyond the side of the bed of the truck. Grant's injuries were a large head wound. It was to the back of his head with a skull fracture. It has been sometimes noted as blunt force trauma, amongst other things. And he had a wound to his cheek, his lower left cheek. Okay. He had a little bitty cut on his left cheek under his eye area. And his mom will say, and she'll show you, when we interviewed her for parts 2 and 3 last year, you can go back and watch. I put a little bit in my story, but she has Grant's shoes from that day. She has Grant's socks from that day. She has Grant's baseball glasses. So if you've seen athletic glasses, they're sturdy. That's the whole point of them. He had a prescription. So his were not just for protection. Like the child did not go without glasses ever. And so she said that little cut where his glasses were on his cheek was very, very, she's seen it a million times before. Like if he ever got bopped with a ball or, run into with that on, with those glasses on, it would leave that little cut there on his cheek. So again, the back of the head had a skull fracture. So he had the large, actually that was like the fatal wound. He had the blow to his cheek, left lower cheek, and then that little cut. Okay. So for a 6'3", 6'4", 18-year-old boy to be found under that truck, and we're not going to try to reconstruct that tonight. We've done it ad nauseum. Again, just refer back to our prior episodes on this. None of it makes sense. So just know that there was a preliminary private forensic exam done. I say private because this did not happen within the Gallatin Police Department. Okay. So Angie was able to hire a private investigator, hire some other people and take care of some of these things. And immediately the word was that Grant could not physically, like it cannot happen that he would be laying the way he was laying with the events to have occurred the way Aaron says that they occurred. Again, Aaron is happy to show you what that looks like because we have multiple videos. I put one of those up on my Instagram story as well. Multiple videos of Aaron reenacting what Grant looked like under the truck. When it's said that just doesn't make sense, or what happened to the truck, right? How did this even happen? He'll say, I don't know. And with basically a smile say, must be a God thing, right? And that's what we hear a lot. And so I'm not even going to go into the fact that the police department was there on scene for 57 minutes. Well, I say on scene. They were on scene 57 minutes. But basically, this accident happened, 911 was called, and everybody was gone and cleared out in 57 minutes. We've talked about it in a vehicular death. If it's even just non-negligent, just an accidental vehicular death, it's a single car death, you're shutting down that road. You're having a reconstruction done. You're fully investigating that, even when there's no suspicion of anything strange. But then we find out that lead on the case who got there immediately, actually. 2 or 3 responding officers got there, and he shut them down and sent them home or sent them out to other things. And he said, I'll take care of this. I'll take care of this. And he did. And we then find out that he actually has known Aaron for a very long time. And if you have time in your day, let me just show you real quick. Let's see here. I'm going to show you what he wrote, okay? Because when you have to write a narrative, or it's also called a supplement, right, Brian?
That's correct.
All right. Usually how would you say, if you get there and you're going to handle this case, you're working this case, we're not saying foul play, right? We're saying, as far as you know, it was an accidental 1-car death.
Yes.
So you have to write a supplement. You have to write your narrative. How long of a document are we generally looking at?
I mean, it's just got to be long enough to cover who, what, when, where, why, how, and to be able to explain how.
Like 5 sentences?
I probably would say that will not cut it.
2 paragraphs?
No, you'd probably have a few pages, because you would have to. You would either have statements from witnesses or video footage, or you're having to describe what was going on the scene, that sort of thing. If it's only a few sentences, I mean, it would depend on what the sentences said, but.
Okay. How about this? So let me fold it because I have some of my notes down there. But to this, also, if you wonder, this is just like kind of cheap. This isn't even like Dunder Mifflin quality paper. Okay.
Yeah.
This is like cheap, just regular copy paper like you'd have at home, not like a form that would have, like a document from the police department, which could maybe be fine if that was your additional notes, because you ran out of room, as Brian was explaining, might happen. But this, in fact, was the one. This is it. This is a copy of the actual narrative from Ty Wilson, who is the responding officer. And I will take a moment to read this to you. He says, T. Wilson 330, and it's titled Fatal Crash. And it says, on Monday, July 20th, 2020, at approximately 8:44, I, Officer Wilson, responded to a serious incident on South Water 109 at number 1357. Upon arrival, I was able to initiate. First of all, I forgot. There are typos everywhere. May not sound like a big deal, but this happens throughout this whole case. I was able to initiate any further investigation. Victim Grant Solomon was struck by his own vehicle, and he was stuck underneath it. So would that in any of your, history or knowledge of things or experience be anything that would be the...
Well, yeah, that's pretty vague.
Yeah.
You'd have to have multiple supplements from other people unless...
We do. Okay. We've got 2 or 3. The longest one we have is from that McKelvey, who arrived. I believe he was the first on scene. So his is a bit more of like an actual paragraph, a little bit more detailed, but that's pretty much it. We got one more here from Shore. It's not really much longer when we're talking about pages and paragraphs and things. But anyway, so these are just the things. And it's difficult to tell this case, and it's difficult to just highlight what these newest developments are with Angie without talking about this some. And I will say it's been a bit of a, I don't know, kind of opening this notebook back up and going back over it all. We spent a lot of time with this, and I don't know. So it doesn't feel very good to get back into it, but then at the same time, everything kind of is flooding back, and all the details are flooding back. When Aaron calls 911, we realize quickly that he's actually up at the top of the parking lot. He doesn't go down to see him. When they ask him certain questions about Grant's position, he'll say, I don't know. And then you can vaguely hear someone in the distance, and that's potentially someone who witnessed something. But to the point that the dispatcher says, is he bleeding? Is he this? Is he that? And he says, I don't know. And then he asks the person down there, and he comes back to say, that there's blood coming out of his mouth. So that's just another little nuance. I will tell you that immediately upon all of this happening, Aaron declined, and we have the paperwork for it. Again, we're not going to come on here and just say, this is what they say happened. Okay. So we have all the documentation from all of this, and signatures. Whereas a lot of the members of that police department didn't seem to sign. I should say the older ones didn't. The younger ones were doing, I feel like, their due diligence and signing their work. The older fellas who, I mean, it's not, I guess, hearsay or slander to say that they knew Aaron personally, because they did. They're the ones who we start lacking some signatures and getting some contradictory information. But we learned that Aaron immediately declined any forensic investigation of the truck, because I feel like it would make sense that if your son is trapped under this truck, because you don't know, he'll throw it out there to the dispatcher. Like, I think it must have jumped out of park and rolled back. I think he must have gotten caught up trying to stop it. Again, a lot of speculation when your son's under a truck and you're not over there trying to provide physical care, life-saving measures, or screaming at them to bring an ambulance. You're actually providing them with the story of how you feel like it all happened right that moment. The truck, there are tracks from the truck going forward into the ditch. There are not tracks from the truck going backward from the top of the parking lot. So if things happen the way Aaron said that they did, there is no disturbed grass in front of the truck. There is no, picture asphalt, y'all. There's some dust and little bits of gravel and things that easily make a tire mark from a truck. None of it. But again, like I said, there were tire marks going into the ditch from the front, from the sidewalk area. Okay. Everything indicates the wheels were turned to the right. The truck was put in park. Finally, we have the black box. And yes, vehicles have a black box too, right? So like you've heard about in an airplane or something like that, if you retrieve the black box, and that can give us all the final moments of what happened before this crash. Vehicles have this too, of a certain age. And Grant's trunk did. And so we do know that the expert on that came back to say that twice there were 2 impacts, and both times the seatbelt was engaged. So all accounts feel like it was driven rather than rolled. There was a plastic milk jug. It's one time you can be thankful for someone littering, because there was an old littered piece of trash milk jug, a gallon, in the ditch. It happened to be in front of the front tire of that ditch. So had that truck been rolling backward, like Aaron says, it would have gone over that milk jug, right? And the milk jug was not crushed from that side. In fact, the truck tire was against it from the front. Okay. So I'll show illustrations of all this so you guys can, if you haven't become familiar, you can see what I'm talking about exactly. Just know that there are conflicting information between they did the medico-legal examination, if you will. And that's just kind of when a hired person comes in to do, a report on his body. We have the doctors and nurses' notes. We have the medical examiner signing off on things, and we have conflicting information throughout. Okay. We have Aaron driving the truck from 2 days after the event occurred. Within 48 hours, he's driving it around town. But then he's able to convince a local State Farm insurance employee that the truck was a total loss and scrapped it to a junkyard pretty much immediately. But then by the next year, Grant's mother, Angie, and some of her friends who were pretty diligent in all of this scoured scrap yards all around and were actually able to find Grant's actual truck and buy it back, and be in possession of that so that they could potentially do future forensic analysis or testing or reconstruction with it. We personally tried to contact Toyota, because at least then you make sense of what happened. You make sense.
Mm-hmm.
This is your vehicle. You wouldn't want this to happen, right? You open an investigation, you figure it out. Trying in every way that anybody could to help things out here. But all of that to say, Gracie has finally turned 18. That was kind of the next thing. So Grant turned 18 just weeks before his death. And if you remember, I told you that his friends will corroborate that Grant's plan once turning 18 was to try to get custody himself of Gracie. Because remember, the judge that was Aaron's friend said that Angie could not litigate with Aaron anymore for 6 years on that kind of bogus order, right? So Angie's hands were tied. So Grant, ever the protector, wanted to gain custody of his sister, at least for the little bit of time until she turned 18, so that no one ever had to worry about returning to custody with their father. word got out about this, and Grant did turn 18, in fact. And just like I said, weeks later, he was dead under his truck in the parking lot of the baseball training facility with his father, whom he had not seen for 2 years prior. The case smells bad all the way around. We've got, we've got DAs, we've got senators. We've got an initial report that came back that said that there had been a homicide. And then when asked about it, the DA says, oh, I don't know why he ever said that. It never was. It was just a tragic accident. Nothing to investigate here. Calls have been unanswered for years. We've been on calls with Angie while she's calling them, trying to get information. I think Brian always goes back to the idea of it's not that difficult. If this legitimately is what they say it is, if it's legitimately just a tragic, tragic accident, then they can sit down with the family and they can just explain it. They can show it. But there's nothing to show when I don't even mean a murder investigation. I mean, the scene was not investigated as a fatality, in their city, within their department's jurisdiction. So there's all of that. I promise you it's going to be a short show tonight. Time's already gotten away from me, and I knew it would happen because it does whenever we talk about this. But moving forward quickly, when it comes to the charges at hand, again, Angie was charged back Friday, about a week and a half ago, April 11th of 2025, with solicitation to commit first-degree murder by a hired hand. It was kind of like movie-esque, if you will. It was done in the parking lot of a big mall there in Franklin, Tennessee, and the man she was speaking to wound up being an undercover police officer with the Franklin Police Department. Evidently, the TBI was also involved. That's the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. We have the arrest affidavit here, and basically, it says, I'm going to read you this, guys, and then we're going to pop off. We may do another brief show on this week, later on this week, but it says on April 11th, 2025 at approximately 2:15 p.m., Angela Solomons met with an undercover law enforcement officer acting as a hitman in the parking lot of 1800 Galleria Boulevard in Franklin, Williamson County, Tennessee, for the express purpose of hiring him to murder her ex-husband, Aaron Solomon. Angela Solomon promised future payment to the undercover office, as well as provided the registration to her vehicle as a form of initial collateral payment for Aaron Solomon to disappear and to be put underground. Angela Solomon stated that this would provide her daughter access to a trust fund. She provided the undercover with information on how he could find Aaron Solomon, places he may work, and the area where he lives. This constitutes the offense of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. And that's that. So, like I said, the bond reduction hearing did not happen this past Tuesday, and we will be awaiting her first actual court date come the end of April or May. I'm seeing conflicted dates on that. And obviously, we will definitely keep you guys posted as we go. We have a lot of narrative right now online. A lot of her supporters feel like she was framed or coerced, or it's this whole thing. All we know is that, per the Franklin Police Department, a concerned citizen came forward, because at the end of the day, if she's talking to an undercover in a mall parking lot, someone had to let that undercover know that that meeting ever even needed to take place. So what we can't be privy to right now, because obviously it's ongoing, but what obviously we want to know so much is, tell me more about this concerned citizen. How did this person get the information they got? I will tell you that Angie was notorious for not trusting a soul. So much had happened to her life and to her events and with the kids and all this and that, like leading up to it, that there was no one she really kind of could trust. So I will say that, until we know further, she's not the type that would just flippantly snap and say, I'm going to do this in that sense. So we don't really know what happened, but that's kind of the information that we have at this time. Gracie, like I said, just turned 18 this past October. She started a GoFundMe to help with funds for her mother. However, that was taken down within, I would say, 12 to 24 hours, because GoFundMe does not allow any kind of donation collection for anything that has to do with any formal charges. So there is something that you can do called a give, send, or what is it? Go. Yeah, Give, Send, Go, I believe is what it's called. So it's kind of like a GoFundMe. But so she did start that. I think we're going to have to pop off. We've got a commitment to get to. So we're going to have to cut the goodbye short tonight. We do appreciate you guys showing up early. And we will absolutely keep you posted on these changing developments right now, because I think everybody's just a little bit blown away. But again, please do go reference yourself with the case if you'd like, at least part 3, if not part 2 and part 3 of the Grant Solomon case that we did last year. And that'll get you up to speed for any future developments. But as always, you want to tell them good night?
Good night, everybody.
All right. We love y'all. Thanks for showing up. I'm sorry we got to end so abruptly, but we will be back soon. And until next week, we will see y'all next Tuesday. Good night, y'all.